Ladies and gentlemen, in a significant development making headlines across the United States, a federal court has temporarily halted the deployment of National Guard troops to Oregon, marking a pivotal moment in the nation's ongoing debate over the balance of power between the judiciary and the executive branch. The recent judicial intervention marks a defining moment in the United States' ongoing struggle to balance executive authority with judicial oversight. When a federal judge issued a temporary restraining order blocking the National Guard's deployment to Oregon, it wasn't merely a procedural decision, it became a reflection of the deep constitutional questions surrounding the limits of governmental power. The order effectively pauses any movement of troops until the court can determine whether such deployment complies with both federal and state laws. This intervention underscores the judiciary's role as a critical check on executive action, especially when public safety, civil rights, and the use of military force intersect. Legal analysts point out that such rulings often shape national precedents, influencing how future administrations handle internal security crises. The court's decision also sends a broader message about transparency and accountability, reminding both the federal and state governments that emergency actions must still adhere to the rule of law. In many ways, this intervention not only halts troop movement, it reaffirms the principle that no branch of government is above judicial scrutiny, reinforcing the foundation of American democracy. The halt in Oregon's National Guard deployment has reignited a long-standing debate over the boundaries between state and federal authority in the United States. Throughout American history, moments of crisis have tested the limits of who controls military mobilization within state borders. Governors often assert that the National Guard primarily serves state interests unless formally federalized, while federal officials argue that national security and domestic stability sometimes require broader intervention. This tension becomes especially pronounced when issues of civil unrest or public safety arise, as both sides claim to act in the public's best interest. In Oregon's case, the court's ruling highlights just how delicate that balance remains. Supporters of the decision say it defends state sovereignty and prevents federal overreach, while critics contend that it could hinder the federal government's ability to respond swiftly to emergencies. Legal scholars suggest that this case could set an important precedent for how the U.S. interprets the limits of executive power at both state and federal levels. Ultimately, this renewed focus on jurisdiction underscores a fundamental truth about American governance: authority may be divided, but accountability must remain unified under the Constitution. The political implications of the court's decision to halt the Oregon National Guard deployment are already rippling through Washington and state capitals nationwide. Lawmakers from both major parties have seized upon the ruling to advance their own narratives about the role of the judiciary and the reach of executive power. Some Democrats and civil liberties advocates have praised the court's move as a necessary safeguard against the potential misuse of military force in domestic affairs, emphasizing that public demonstrations should be handled through de-escalation and dialogue rather than armed presence. On the other hand, many Republicans and national security voices argue that the decision undermines the government's ability to respond quickly to threats, portraying it as judicial interference in matters of public safety. This divide reflects the broader polarization that defines much of American politics today, where every legal or policy action becomes a test of ideology. The case also places governors and state officials under increased scrutiny, as they must now navigate both public opinion and court mandates. As debates continue in the media and Congress, one thing is clear: this legal standoff is not just about Oregon, it's about the balance of power and the political future of domestic security in America. Public reaction to the court's decision has been swift and deeply divided, reflecting the complex emotions Americans feel when the issues of law, security, and freedom collide. Across the country, citizens have taken to social media and community forums to express both relief and frustration. Many view the ruling as a victory for constitutional rights, seeing it as a sign that judicial oversight still protects the people from potential government overreach. Advocacy groups for civil liberties have praised the decision, arguing that the use of military forces on domestic soil should always face the highest level of scrutiny. However, others, particularly those focused on law enforcement and security, believe the court's action could weaken the nation's ability to maintain order during volatile times. Veterans and National Guard families are also watching closely, concerned about how such rulings could affect the Guard's future missions and reputation. Political commentators note that the situation has become a symbol of America's ongoing struggle to define where safety ends and liberty begins. In the broader sense, this legal pause in Oregon has sparked a nationwide conversation, reminding Americans that democracy thrives not just through power, but through the constant questioning of how that power is used. The court's decision to halt the National Guard deployment to Oregon has become more than just a legal matter, It stands as a defining moment in America's ongoing dialogue about power, responsibility, and constitutional balance. This ruling has brought to light the fragile but vital relationship between the judiciary, the executive branch, and state authorities, reminding the nation that even in moments of unrest, the rule of law must remain supreme. It has also exposed the deep political and ideological divides that continue to shape U.S. governance, showing how every decision can ripple far beyond its immediate context. For many Americans, this case represents a test of whether justice can keep pace with the challenges of modern security and civil freedom. As the legal process unfolds, the nation watches closely, not just to see what happens in Oregon, but to reaffirm what kind of democracy the United States continues to strive to be, one that upholds its laws, respects its institutions, and protects the rights of its people above all else.